think a lot of it depends on what institutional values you have that are important. If winning is the easiest way to measure success of an athletic program, and for someone who's not in it every day and involved in the program every day, in many cases that's all they're going to see. And so a lot depends on what values you emphasize day in, day out. For sure, I mean, we see that at every level. We see that at the professional level, college level, all the way through. That winning is what is driving programs, universities, professional franchises. It's what determines how much money they make. It, in many cases, determines whether people keep their jobs, even on a year-to-year basis. And so I think at that kind of level, it's a whole different kind of pressure. I think within a school, and in particular a private school, it's easy for us to define the values that are important. When I meet with the coach at a preseason or a postseason meeting, we talk about winning, but only within the context of doing things the right way. So often at the high school level, you're going to win or lose based on all kinds of variables, and so it's completely unfair to judge a team on the simple notion of whether they won or lost a game. I'm a firm believer that winning is the result of doing things right, especially if you're doing things right throughout a program. And so, if you emphasize, let me put it this way, if all you emphasize within your program is winning, people are going to feel they have a lot more leeway in how they go about getting those wins. Whereas if you emphasize other things, especially day in, day out, with your announcements, with your meetings, that sort of thing, I think it's easier to set the right tone in that way.
So from a coach's perspective, how are you intentional with your players about that kind of relational character piece?
I think it really starts with defining what you consider winning. And I'm a proponent and disciple of John Wooden, and one of his greatest attributes, I thought, was he never considered winning having more points than the other team. His definition of success was the self-satisfaction of knowing that you gave your best. And for us, as a coach, I've never, in 20 years being a basketball coach at this point, I've never gone into a locker room and said, we've got to win this game. I've always said, we've got to give our best, and only you know whether or not you've given your best or not. And if we can do that, typically you may have more points at the end of the game if you've given your best. And there are many instances where, and I remind our players about this all the time, where how many times do you just play a game of pickup where you may have the most talented players, but you've lost the game. And that means that you have not come anywhere near your potential because you had more talent than the other team. And just the opposite occurs as well. Sometimes you're playing with less talent, you lose, but the deficit is closer than everybody recognizes it should be. And that would qualify as a win if you use the definition of success like John Wooden. So for me, it's about teaching young men that doing your best is really what you're trying to do. And let the result, stand where it is. I always blame the scoreboard on the coach anyway. I say, hey, if we have less points, it's my fault. If we have more points, we have better talent. And that's how I kind of look at it.
And I think that could be a watershed moment for almost every young coach when you first have a game in which you have won the game, you've scored more points, but you're upset with your team. Well, and for the kids to get that and to hear the coach, so many, I remember the first time I experienced that with the team where we won and the kids were thrilled, and I come down to the post-game huddle and I tell them how poorly I thought they performed and how poorly they played and how they didn't support each other. And it blew their minds. And it took a while. You break them down a little bit, you start building them back up, and that's a key moment for any coach to establish what's important for them. And really hammer that home with the student.
I think, like Greg had mentioned, I think a lot of times your most coachable moments are when they've had more points than the other team. They're more probably receptive to hearing what you have to say as opposed to a loss. And being able to substantiate whether or not you think they've performed at a level that they can perform at. It's difficult because everywhere they turn, it's all about who has more points, who makes more money. So unfortunately, I think our society, which is a whole nother interview, has gone in a different direction. But as coaches, all you can continue to do is stay on your guys to make sure that they're giving their best.
Yeah.
And like Greg said, I probably, if I documented how many times I was upset, really upset with my team after a game, I would guess most of those times we had more points than the other team, but we didn't play the way we're capable of playing.
I think you touched on one critical aspect, and by far, my most important job as athletic director is selecting the coaches that we have. And I was blessed to inherit Mark, who's one of the best coaches I've ever seen at any level, and that's really what it is. I mean, Mark has had significant success in all kinds of aspects of his life, personal, private, professional, and he can make that connection, and the kids can see that. And really, it's about that daily discipline that I know he has because I see him coach. I watch his practices. It's about what he values. He never lets a moment pass where he can pass on a lesson that's going to help the boys succeed in life. And he has those principles that he emphasizes day in and day out. That's the key.
I think we're fortunate here at Church Farm as well because we don't have quite the pressure to have more points at the end of the game than the other team. Of course, every coach is trying to be successful, but I think it allows you an opportunity to always remember, from a helicopter perspective, what's most important, and to remind our student athletes that basketball is a small piece, athletics are a small piece. You're a student athlete. Student comes before athlete. And to be able to remind them of that and sit guys down maybe when they need to spend some additional time, in a particular course, or sit a kid down if he's not being a great teammate. We can afford to do that because we don't quite have that pressure where some coaches may feel. But I think ultimately for a young man, it's for them to see that the skills, the hard work, paying the price to be successful in the basketball court can also apply to maybe some of the other things they do in life as well. Well, I think the greatest example, and I say it to my own children, not just the students here at CFS, it's don't judge me by what I say, but what I do. Because talk is cheap.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want you to judge. Look around, look what I do. Look, if I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. Yeah. And not only will I be there, I'm going to be there early. And we talk about that with all of our guys and how it translates, whether it's running a drill and not quite touching the line, which will be an issue, and I'll try to explain to them how cutting corners, whether it's a drill, whether it's a test, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, you have to pay the price for success. Yeah. And you've got to be willing to do that, and you've got to be willing to do it when someone's not watching you. And if you really look at the philosophies of a John Wooden, who arguably is the most successful coach in the history of team sports, he was able to do it in a way that was not like most, definitely in his era, and even today. I mean, he was able to stick with his core beliefs, share those with his team, get them to understand that it's not about cutting corners and taking the road most traveled, but sometimes it means having to cut folks loose who may drag you down or do some things you don't necessarily want to do. Yeah. So you can do that and still have success as well.